Let's look at a few news articles. So I'm glad to see this. Ubuntu is beginning to add Rust. I've been talking about Rust for years. It's the new language that is supposed to be as fast as C, and it's variants like C++ and C#, but much, much more secure because it fixes the memory corruption vulnerabilities that plague C. And Ubuntu's been, and Linux, Ubuntu and Windows have both been working on adding it to the kernel. But what they've done now is they've added it to sudo. Sudo, the tool you use to elevate to administrator privileges from a limited account. And they're replacing it with sudo-rs, a Rust-based version of it. So that's the beginning. I'm glad to see it happen. This sounds like a pretty small beginning, but anyway, they're moving in the right direction. There's something called kick idler, which I must say is an extremely cynical term. This is employee monitoring software. And I've heard about this ever since the pandemic. People are working at home, and their bosses installed some kind of software on their machine to make sure they're actually working and not goofing off. And there's a related product to see if you're cheating on tests that they use at a lot of colleges. And in both cases, I've seen many, many articles complaining that this stuff doesn't work. Employees are getting punished when they were in fact working because it doesn't count correctly whether you're working, and students are getting busted for cheating when they aren't cheating because it does something ridiculous like try to see if your eyes are moving off the screen and constantly triggers on innocent movements and stuff. So these things are pretty horrible, and employees apparently hate this stuff, but apparently it's common and a lot of people actually have to run it. And so what the bad guys are doing now is installing this stuff. Like I mentioned, a real big trend these days is living off the land where you don't use malware, because the malware will get caught by the antivirus and the end device protection suites. So you use some kind of known commercial software. And so they take known commercial employee monitoring software and install it. And now that software can log keystrokes and take images of the screen and watch what you're doing. So create videos of what you're doing. So it's basically just handing you all the data. And it's not going to set off your antivirus because it's legitimate stuff. So that's pretty clever. And of course, soon we'll have Microsoft Recall running that just does this on Windows machines by default. And all you have to do is steal that database, although Microsoft has made it opt-in in the latest version and supposedly added some encryption to it, although I don't think that encryption will save you if they compromise your running machine. Anyway, it's a pretty clever trick. So the NIH, Trump's doing something. Many people have wondered over the last month or so exactly how far Trump would go in destroying the American government. And now I think we're undeniably in the era where he just absolutely ignores rulings of the courts, including the Supreme Court. And that sets up a really serious constitutional crisis, sort of like when a military dictatorship takes over, where you wonder if the previous centers of authority matter at all. Now, the Republicans dominating Congress have ended Congress passing laws, apparently, and ended all Congress oversight of the presidency. So our system is supposed to have 3 independent branches, now only has 2, which is Trump and the courts. And if he ignores the courts, then he really is a dictator. He can just do anything he wants, and there is no guardrail to stop him. And he's certainly been acting that way. Although, as I suppose we should have predicted with Trump, he doesn't admit it. He doesn't say I'm ignoring the courts, he just lies about them. So a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that he cannot be deporting people to this prison camp in El Salvador without due process. And he has to bring back the guy that he sent there by mistake who didn't do anything wrong. And he said he got one of his subordinates to just go on and say, they gave us a 9-0 decision saying everything we do is fine and we can just keep doing it. So they're just lying about the court order and pretending they can't read it and hoping that no citizens are smart enough to read it. And that's one possible way to go. And the Supreme Court you see what they do about that, but now they're doing the same thing here. The National Institute of Health, as you know, Elon Musk and Doge have just been destroying all scientific research in America and trying to end education and libraries and everything, and place them all under political control so they only disseminate political propaganda of the type they like. And they had a court order telling them you cannot cut these research grants. It's all completely illegal because it's the duty of Congress to control expenditure of money. It is not up to the president to approve money unilaterally or deny it unilaterally. But they're just doing it anyway. And what he's doing is the same thing he did in his first term. He's sending his lawyers to court. And his lawyers are telling the judge, oh, we're obeying your order, when they're absolutely not obeying the order. And the result of that, the first time, was his lawyers went to prison, got disbarred, and so on. So he may be doing that again. It's amazing to me how many people line up to jump into the wood chipper and work for Trump. But I mean, if you do work for Trump, you know you're going to get thrown under the bus, and his lawyers are getting thrown under the bus again. I think it's something like 8 of his lawyers are disbarred the first time, and I think pretty soon it'll be another bunch this time. Because you can't go into court and just lie like this. So also another big thing Trump likes to do is to not collect data that would look unfavorable to him. You may remember in the early days of the pandemic, there was a small number of cases in America of COVID, like a few hundred, and there was a cruise ship that wanted to land that had thousands of cases, and Trump refused to let them land, saying that would just mess up his numbers. So he doesn't understand that there's a difference between reality and the way things look. The only thing he cares is how they look. So they're ending measurements. The same thing Florida did. Florida wanted to open up everything and deny anyone any right to have a vaccine mandate, including cruise ships, and they just stopped counting COVID cases, so they wouldn't have to admit that they were spreading more COVID. So now they're ending measuring of weather disasters, so they don't have to admit there's any global warming and such. This is a big deal all through the government. They're ending all the things that collect data that can be used to measure the impact of things. And this, again, is very typical of a totalitarian regime. They control the press and the colleges, so those things only publish propaganda favorable to the administration, and they just prevent anybody from knowing what's really going on. This is working very well in Russia. In Russia, Putin enjoys something like 80 or 90% popularity, and they all believe complete lies about what's going on in Ukraine. They believe terrible things, and they don't even know how many people are dying there and so on. This is a common thing. Every nation, including this nation in the Vietnam War, every nation tries to cover up, when they're at war, they cover up all the negative stories about their war and try to make everybody think it's working if it isn't. But they're pushing it to a new extreme. And so you may remember a few weeks ago, no need to vote to terminate university grant. No, well, the Congress should be the only one that can terminate those university grants. But Trump just did it with DOGE. See, what Trump has done is what the president of South Korea tried to do. He has declared a national emergency. Now, the president of South Korea tried to declare martial law and shut down the parliament. But the parliament people managed to sneak over the barriers and get in there and push him out and impeach him and actually throw him in jail for that. Trump declared that we are in a national emergency because we are at war with Venezuela, or something like that is completely fake. But for the time, since the Republicans control the Congress and they haven't pushed back, nobody has stopped him on that. So he has a period of time when he can just do anything with that thin veneer of legitimacy, but the courts are striking it down. But I mean, that's what's happening. He's doing stuff by edict that he has no power to do, but the Congress is not pushing back, and the courts are pushing back, but he's just ignoring the court orders and lying about them and claiming he's obeying them when he's disobeying them. So we'll see how far this goes before it all comes crashing down. But this is what he learned from his lawyer, Roy Cohn, who also was Joe McCarthy's lawyer in the Red Scare. What he learned is you can totally break the law, and all you do is go to court and snarl things up and delay things and just keep committing more and more crimes and delaying all the court cases. And you can keep, it's like having a credit card and paying it off with another credit card and paying it off another credit card. You can get away with it for a really long time before it all comes crashing down. And that's been Trump's policy for his whole life. And largely Elon Musk's too. So this is, that's the trick. And it will work for some period of time. I think it may not work much longer, though, because in his second term, he is doing terrible things to Republicans. He's denying FEMA grant to Republican states, and he's ending Medicare and Medicaid, which Republican voters count on, and shutting down Social Security offices that they need. The red states need it more, and now he's shutting down the hospitals in red states by cutting all the medical funding. So I think the only reason Trump stays in power is because he enjoyed like 90% support among Republicans. So all the Republican legislators didn't dare move against him. But I think in about 4 to 8 weeks, when the shelves are empty at the big box stores, and we've already laid off 250,000 workers, and people see inflation start rising, grocery prices rising, everybody's getting laid off, and a huge economic disaster, which seems to be the inevitable consequence of his policies, I think the Republican voters will turn on him. All the polls show that his favorability has fallen drastically. So if the Republican Party he no longer enjoys 90% of their support, but that falls to like 50%, then the Republican senators and Congress people will start to vote against him, and they'll start to push back against some of this. So, we've been through all this before. We did all this in the Red Scare. It was very much like this. There was a fake enemy, and they decided to ignore all checks and balances and just destroy everything in the country to terminate that fake enemy. They pretended there were all these communists everywhere destroying the country, like now he pretends there's all these immigrants everywhere destroying the country. In both cases, they just made it up. There is no problem remotely that big or that important, but that's the emergency that gives them the excuse to ignore all the checks and balances. But it only works as long as the people go along with it. And when you actually hurt the people by causing them to lose their job and their health care, I think they will finally notice. This is why you can get away with almost anything in America for a while, because Americans are pretty distracted. Most of them are playing video games and doing fun things and having a happy life and not really paying attention to politics until they have to. But when you tamper with Social Security and Medicare, they're going to notice that, I think. Anyway, so this is something that happened a few weeks ago. DOGE came in and they took over a federal agency and they made new accounts. I was talking about it a few weeks ago when it happened, and they stole all the data by sending it out with DNS tunneling and other techniques that bad guys use. And the administrator that watched all this went public and released all the information about the stuff they've been doing. And one of the things that really caught my attention from an information security point of view is they created new administrator accounts to log in and steal the data. And within half an hour of creating that account, criminals in Russia started trying to log in, or somebody in Russia started trying to log in with that account, but they didn't have the second factor for two factors, so they couldn't, or there was geo-blocking, so they couldn't get in. So that raised really two obvious possible explanations. One is that the DOGE people had their machines infected with Russian malware, and the other one is that they were deliberately handing it over to the Russians because they're in cahoots with the Russians. And I thought that second one is unlikely, and now this is more evidence than the first one. They now found that those credentials and other credentials from one of the DOGE software engineers are being dumped in data dumps. So it does appear, as you would expect, that the DOGE team that just seems to be a bunch of cowboys that don't really understand security at all have just got infected machines, which would make a lot of sense. The same reason why you don't want anyone like Pete Hegseth using ordinary apps or an ordinary phone, because those things can easily be taken over by any military with Pegasus and other high-level attacks. People have to understand, when you're in such an important position as DOGE or the head of the Department of Defense, you can't use normal consumer devices anymore. They're all too easy to hack. You have to use special hardened military devices. And they're not doing that. And the DOGE people are not doing that. And the point is, they just came from like Twitter and Tesla, where they're not that important. It's not that important to hack the IT guy at Tesla as it is to hack the IT guy at DOGE that has his finger on all the company data. So, I think they just moved into a position of real importance and real responsibility, and their techniques are not appropriate to the new level they hold, which is why this is all illegal. They're not supposed to do any of this without actually being in a federal agency, without actually going through a confirmation hearing before Congress, without having oversight and an experienced IT department and security department auditing what they do and having all these rules about how you can only do certain things in a secure facility and all that. That's why we have all that, which they've been ignoring for exactly this reason. But anyway, it does, I think, go against the most paranoid, crazy conspiracy theory that they're deliberately handing it to the Russians. That seemed a little too crazy to me, but I certainly can easily imagine that they've all got their stuff infected by advanced military malware because they're not taking enough precautions. And I have a lot of students that are infected with what appears to be advanced military malware. I think like 1 million people have got infected with Pegasus or something. A lot of people are getting infected with that stuff. It's out there. And so if you're like a world-famous top government official, they're coming for you. And you really ought to use better systems than an average consumer system. Anyway, let me stop the news.